Good morning, and Mirador Television again from Lewes in East Sussex, punching above our weight as usual. With me this morning will be Paul Fowl. He catches me out on that every time because I think there should be a little a grave or acute accent on the last E of his name. So he goes, but he says, no, 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 mustn't. Anyway, we had a wonderful program on yesterday with the youngsters from New York who gave me a grilling, and we've got part two coming up later today as well. All in the world is not rosy this morning. The Prince Philip, the Duke of Edinburgh, spent a second night in hospital. He's 99, and of course we're all cheering and hoping that he'll reach his century. And actually, he was quite a good cricketer in his day. I can remember seeing film of him playing for. I think perhaps it was the Duke of Norfolk's 11 against some pros. So he was a fair old swinger with the bat. But it is not COVID related. We are assured it is not COVID related. It's something else. So I don't know whether that's you're going to be grateful for that or not. But anyway, he's being kept in for the moment. Now, something that is always dear to my heart because I've travelled half of the northern hemisphere fighting the injustices levied by authoritarian regimes against the media. Do we call Facebook media? I don't know. But Facebook has blocked Australians from sharing news items. I haven't got to the bottom of the issue yet, and I'm sure that if you just pick up the papers, it'll tell you in blazing headlines because nobody likes to see the news tampered with. But that should start in Australia, and since Paul knows the Australian scene very well. We'll ask him when we bring him on in a few minutes' time. The virus has declined dramatically since the turn of the year. Yes, we're all really peed off about having to stay at home and not being able to go out and not being able to mix and particularly not going to the pub and that sort of thing. But it has had its effect. And to the point where now that there are some suggestions that the new blueprint for letting us out of lockdown could come as early as next month. And that by the end of March and the beginning of April, we will see some of the non-essential, so-called non-essential shops opening up. And that before the end of April, we could see the pubs back in operation. Now, if that they can live to that schedule and so on, well, jolly good, because we need it. We need releasing. If they're doing as a political expediency, that's a worry because they're also at the same time, and that's the trouble, the right hand says one thing and the left hand says another. At the same time, travel guidance now being put out is that there are 3 new variants floating around. So if you're moving around, you have to be very careful. How that's going to play out in March, if those variants are still attacking us willy-nilly, left, right, and centre, I have no idea. But we have to be extra vigilant, of course. But let's just hope. Let's hope that we're going to be let out of school. The thing that worries me about the Facebook thing is, it's very easy to censor. I have worked in communities, societies, countries. They're quite blatant about controlling the media. I work in Romania. Nobody was better at it than Ceausescu, but I worked in both Ceausescu Romania and early EU Romania. And actually, they haven't learned many lessons. They were still trying very hard to control the media. And things haven't got any more difficult for them in these countries. Poland is backslid from the promises it made when it joined the EU, and so is Slovenia. And there are a number of others that are now beginning to show creaking at the seams. And a free media and a supported media by its community is essential in any civilized country because you're not free unless you've got a mouthpiece that can say, within the laws of the land, can say what it's like and criticize the leadership. And there are worrying signs that perhaps that's not happening here anymore as freely as it used to. And that worries me. However, we will continue to keep fighting It's not easy. Believe me, it's not easy. And the trouble is, here's the difference between private enterprise and public service. Is the private enterprise is they knock on your door and you owe them a tenner and they want it now. The public enterprises that they promise you a grant of a tenner, and in 4 weeks' time they're still talking about how the rules and regulations will apply. That's about the size of it. Right. Manchester, somebody has been arrested. The police broke up a 40-person house party. Those are the idiots. Not only they're trying to profit from COVID, but also they're endangering everybody. They're keeping us all back. Those are the idiots that actually keep us from getting out of this rotten situation. And the locally, well, let's just get the weather for a moment, because actually Burling Gap is in trouble again. There's a lot of erosion down there. Be careful if you're going down there. The weather is going to surge at the weekend. It's going to be 15 degrees, according to the experts. And it will improve slowly as it goes through the week. Today, it's going to range between 6 and 10. And there'll be very heavy rain. And we're just going to have to put up with it, I'm afraid. There we go. Enough of that. Enough of that. There we go. That's what you're going to expect today. Heavy rain, but mild temperatures, really. It's going to steady around 9 all day, could nudge up to 10. And the breeze will be modest. But watch out for a modest breeze, because particularly in Lewis, our streets funnel the wind. So you put on your best hat like this and toddle down to the store, and the next thing you know is you're being lifted into the air if you've actually got it stuck to your head. And if not, it's going barreling down the street and you've got to chase it. Right, okay. Let us now see whether we can find our good friend, Mr. Paul Fowle, and bring him on if add to stream. There, my goodness me. Look at that. All bright.
Good morning, Keith. I've got to say, that introduction and summary was so good, I'm going back to bed.
No, don't quit yet. We've got lots to do. Lots to do. One of the things that, once again, it seemed like a lot of good news on the COVID front. But then, there are these little things that sneak in, 3 variants, 3 mutants that are busy burrowing away. And if those sort of things, I mean, it's a bit like saying the town is safe from outlaws, except there are 4 of them with machine guns lurking down the alleys. That's the way it seems to me, Paul. What's your view?
That's exactly my view. I saw a program on one of the videos where a BMA director was talking to fellow doctors, and it was very good what he said. The doctor said exactly what you and I have been saying about the variant. We both had our vaccines, Keith. We have 12 weeks to wait. My initial fear was within that 12 weeks, a strain or a virus or a mutation would come along. And so in other words, we're going into a dangerous new territory. Hence, people wanted the second vaccine quicker. Okay, that's where we are. The BMA director seemed very assured. It's very rare that they say, he said, look, the first vaccine has worked very well. We're extremely confident, a 99% or something confidence. To me, that's very good, but none of us. I mean, the coronavirus might not even know where it's going. It's all we can do, Keith, is forecast. It's all speculation, but I think that we've had the best treatment we can have. All we can say is we should be in the pubs, I hope, by, June, July. That would be great. So that's it's a all other diseases have been bad, but of course, I mean, I don't think the Spanish flu didn't have any variant. So the problem we've got are these variants, but I'm assured that variants and mutation, it weakens the coronavirus. As just for people who haven't read enough about it, the coronavirus will be with us forever. Now, normally, smallpox, measles, mumps, all other diseases, once they've have been killed off. So it's an interesting one. It won't do any harm. It'll just, work around in the universe, but it will be with us on the Earth forever. So that's how strong it has been, I suppose. So, I can't respect that. But the 12 weeks worries me a bit, Keith. You've had your vaccine. 12 weeks seems to me a long time to wait for the second one. But, what do I know about medicine?
Yeah, I suppose it partly is there's also a sense of fair play. Is why should you and I get one when we need a second one, and we would get our second one before some people have got their first one? I mean, whatever else we may say about this country, I think we still do have a play up and play the game a bit. We're all sporting. You give everybody a chance before we actually get 100% insurance ourselves. Paul, because you have spent a lot of time in Australia, you know the country well. Facebook have blocked people from sharing news. I'm not quite sure what the issue is, but it does bother me that nobody but ourselves, and of course we wouldn't we, because we are media, but are not getting excited about the fact that right throughout the world, media freedoms are slowly being eroded, and they're being done in the most underhand way. And at one time, people said, "Oh, well, you come out of authoritarian regime, and what happens immediately is that big money buys media." Well, there's some truth in that, but somewhere there's got to be a happy medium where we can have a free and independent media that doesn't have to worry about paying the baker when he goes in every morning.
Yep. You've got hello, Keith. You've gone quiet.
Yes, I'm waiting for your response.
Right. If people can see that, media, government, media, government. I remember, as you know, I've met Rupert Murdoch, but I remember the famous thing when obviously he's accused of destroying Tony Blair's prime ministership. But as Putin, it was rumoured that Murdoch was always said that the first phone call that any prime minister made, whether it was Blair or Putin or Bush, it would always be the first call would always be to Rupert Murdoch, which showed that Murdoch's world and press, and as you know, the media far more than I do, Keith, the media were obviously probably not as accurate and obviously a bit biased. So, you would say that Murdoch was Mr. Media, wasn't he? So you could say he could almost break or and destroy, governments, etc. That was his power. So he always consulted. My view of the media is, I think there's good media and there's bad media, as you know. You were obviously on the good media side. I know your old company very well. It's legendary. But the thing is, what's worked out. I've been involved in media things in the city, but it's very hard to know, with millions and millions of media formats of media companies, how is the average person, or how is even the average investigative government going to find out which ones, what's bad, what's good? Because the media, as you know, has such power, it can make or break governments, as you know. So there's two sides to it. I agree that we need a strong media, and we need a media that's controversial. We don't want one like a George Orwellian world where there's just one media. I agree. You've got to have choice. But so the problem the public have is, if it's one media, it's bad. If there's millions and millions of media, how the hell do we disseminate the truth from the mistruth? So it's a hard one. Australia. Now I've got an email from an Australian friend. He mentioned something about that. What the understanding is it that the Australian government have stopped Facebook, or is it Facebook have decided not to share news. Is that right? In
Well,
Australia?
I think it's my reading of it is, and of course it's just sort of ticker stuff at the moment. Is that it's
Yeah.
Facebook has blocked the average Australian from sharing news items. So if
Yeah.
somebody comes up and says the Australian government are lousy, and I want to send that on to you, I can't if I want to use Facebook. They won't let me at the moment. Now that's my reading of it. And
Right.
I
Okay.
mean, what the driver is for Facebook, and I'm sure that it's out there. But of course, we look at things from a Lewis and the Sussex point of view. We're
Yeah.
not parochial, but we are local. So we tend to look at some headlines and have to make up the rest for ourselves, as it were. I mean, even any tampering with freedom of the press is, to me, well, not only to me, but I think that anybody who understands a civilized society is anathema.
Yeah, that's good. Obviously, as you know, I lived 9 years in Australia. I would say that if the Australian government have had any part in it or allowed it, because they would have a say in this, I suspect once everything comes out, the Aussie public aren't stupid. They're democratic, just like we are, and probably tougher with media and politicians than we are, which is good. I would say that either Facebook made a big mistake, and why did they choose Australia? If Australia is the first outpost to test this, are they going to do it worldwide? But Australian press is very interesting because it's had powerful people like Murdoch running it. The press there is very much has a go at the government, but has a go at. But obviously Murdoch was more a dictator in many ways, so you could say it was a bit biased. Clearly, the Blair thing was true, so he's a very powerful man. So until I read more about it, Keith, I know the Aussies won't like any part of their democracy to be undermined. And after all, sharing news is something that is a basic liberty, I would have thought. So I'll find out for the next session. I'll make inquiries and find out what is going on, because the Australian public won't accept anyone infringing their rights. That's for sure.
It is interesting because the other night they were promoting again the movie with Orson Welles, Citizen Kane. And a lot of these things that are dramatized have got a great deal of truth at the heart, as it were. And the fact is, if you like, I am a media mogul. I've got a penny in my pocket. We're struggling to keep this television station alive. But by the same token, I own it and I can do what I like with it. So if I want to bring on sort of 20 dancing girls who are almost Nicholas and then say, down with the government, I can. So everybody has got to share a measure of responsibility in society. And that's really, I think, the basis of a good freedom of any society, whether you're talking about the media or its democratic system or whatever. But when you get to that point where those are threatened for any reason or for any one particular sector in society, then I think you've got problems.
Well, you're absolutely right. Look at the Hitler's war. Look at Romania. Look at when Murdoch and Putin were talking. Yeah, the trouble is, the danger is you get the formula of the government and the media working together, Keith. Where there's one powerful media, i.e., say a Murdoch empire, working with say somebody Putin. I say Rupert Murdoch hasn't done that, but I'm sure in Romania the media were controlled by the government. Yes, therefore, if the media, how the hell do the people therefore have to rely on an outside influence or a world opinion? Well, if everybody else has got the same problem, so yeah, it's terrible. You can't really what's the word? Monitor these things properly, can you? You can have a media watch or a government watch, but at the end of the day, if the government and media want to work together, actually, as you say, you've got an Orwellian world, and how does the average man on the street change it? So that's the worst thing. And as you say, Orwell, in the Orwellian world, it was completely dominated government, media. You rather like now, lockdown was quite a common thing in that.
Yeah.
So it's a tough one because we need a strong media, but we need a strong government.
Yeah.
And if the two get together or fall out, where are we left in making a judgment? So it's a tough one. Local media is good. I think that's great, local media. But of course, when you've got a mogul situation like Maxwell, like Murdoch, then how do you change it? Do you introduce laws? Do you tighter legally? Then we become a very legally dominated society. So democracy is a very hard place to be sometimes.
Yeah. It's interesting. There are 2 points there. First of all, the shrinkage of local media has been, when you start to look at it in percentage terms, has been absolutely substantial. I mean, it's incredible what's happened. But because we, on a day-to-day basis, get used to things, is we don't notice when they disappear, particularly until an issue crops up. But talking about a total wipeout of the media or information, is Ceausescu in Romania was very successful, probably the most successful dictator in keeping his citizens from knowing what's going on the outside, and from the outside know what was going on inside. And in my early years there, this is long before they became members of the EU, and actually before Ceausescu was assassinated. But I worked with a lady, and she was nudging 50, and she had pink hair. And I didn't like to say, I wasn't being impolite, but to say, what the hell is a lady like you doing with pink hair? But actually, she volunteered one day, and she said, if you're looking at my pink hair, which I wasn't, but anyway, if you're looking at my pink hair, she said, that was the way we dissidents were able to communicate with each other during the Ceausescu years, is we dyed our hair, and that's how we recognized one another. And she said that because the police, and the secret police particularly, were cut off themselves from outside Romania, they didn't know that this wasn't just another fashion fad. They didn't realize that we were letting one another know, hey, we're one of the jolly band. It's very interesting, I thought. But she wasn't giving up her pink hair even after freedom. Right, Paul, we'll just do a little reminder to people about who we are and what we are, and then we'll come back. And I invite you on. Well, first of all, it's always a great pleasure talking to you, but I invite you on so that you can tell us some of the things you think are important. And we've gone 53 minutes into this program, and we still haven't got around to your points of view. So we'll get back to you in a minute. Okay, here is the news headlines. Here are the news headlines. Facebook has blocked people in Australia from sharing news items between one another. Travel guide. 3 mutant variants of COVID are lurking. Be careful. But the virus has declined since January quite sharply and quite steeply, giving rise to the fact that the government may well end lockdown earlier than we thought, with some things happening by the end of March and even pubs possibly being open by the end of April. But don't hold your breath. And the 40 people were busy having a house party, rocking and shaking, or whatever the word is, and the police raided and locked them up, and they are being threatened with jail sentences. As for the weather, well, we're going to get a heat wave at the weekend. But I was talking to Stephen Catlin yesterday, who knows a lot of things that none of us do. And I said, Stephen, it's all going to get much warmer by the weekend, and we won't have our fingers frozen off. And he said, yeah, but somebody else has predicted that we're going to have 2 feet of snow dumped on us. So who knows? The world is full of uncertainty. But here today, it's going to be probably no more than 10, average around 9. We're going to have heavy rain throughout part of the day, and also we can expect some moderate winds. So that's it. Supposedly a good outlook, but not so hot today. Right, Mr. Paul, what have you got in mind this morning to impart your wisdom
to? I've got 4 major issues, Keith, in question mark. Right, COVID. Okay, let's bring it up to date. About 15 million people have been vaccinated. The first vaccine has gone very well. We've now been told within the next 12 weeks, so they've left it open. Right. So there's 2 obstacles we still have ahead of us. Within that 12 weeks, and we're hearing about variants, will there be a variant that greatly disrupts the second vaccine? And the very big question, because the economy can't stand more than being affected, but until the end of the year, it certainly can't afford that. Will the government, after the last vaccine is done, say, okay, we need a period of lockdown to make sure that everyone who's had the vaccine is totally okay? Now, that would be an understandable move. But from talking to friends, talking to the public, this lockdown has been awful. And I think in some ways this lockdown has made mistakes. So if they get it wrong next time, the mental health will actually go through the roof. Some people are already, certainly in Hove, which is a very prosperous place. The face. I'm one of the, being an ex-policeman, I look at people's faces and look at their behaviour. That many of them are walking like zombies around, and the government have got to look at that. You can't perfectly make a decision when it's all over. You have to go with what you're told, and they've got to be brave. If we must get this economy back. The spending spree will go on probably late after summer, and then before Christmas, we've got to get some semblance of back to. Well, no, let's not. We're not going back to the old order. We're going back to the best of the old order, added to the order that we're going to fix when we're back. So that's people who get down, I say to them, this is your golden opportunity. When have you had a chance to spend time with the family this long? I know it's long. Where have you had a chance to actually gather your thoughts, not be pressurized and say, this is a life I will have? Many people who take that attitude will do well. Many will go under. But that's the way people react, Keith. I'm a positive person. I believe that there's too many doom-mongers. And as you know, I'm very Churchillian in that respect. If Churchill hadn't have been as optimistic, we wouldn't have won the war in many ways. So the whole country there didn't go and say, oh, my God, we're going to get another lockdown, etc. They just got on with it. That's all. So that's my point. That's the COVID side, but I'm not a medical man. I do worry about the gap between the first vaccine, the second vaccine, and what will they do after the second vaccine? Will they let us all go back? Okay. The economy is the key one. That my view is that yes, it's dictated purely by confidence in the markets and coronavirus. I would hope that let me think. after autumn, I would hope the government, if they've released lockdown, we will start moving again. It'll be nice to think that we could have 2 or 3 months before Christmas to actually get back to earning money. I mean, as I say, my son, he's in an industry, he hasn't been paid for a year and a half. And there's many like that. He's not getting down because he understands that there will be a time. But we've got to get back soon. And yes, it sounds awful what I'm going to say now. There will be deaths after probably the decision's made. But you have to make a decision. It's terrible. In life, you can't just say, well, let's wait. Oh, there must be a golden opportunity in 2 months' time. The case I've got, I think it's Australia or New Zealand. The city or town has had one case, and they've carried out lockdown. Well, that's what you've got to avoid. One case doesn't mean to say you lock down a whole city. Yeah. So my view is that it's a terrible thing for the government to have to do. You've got to decide. It's like when Chamberlain was saying, should we fight or not? You have to make a decision. The longer you delay that decision, the more people suffer. Does that make sense?
It does indeed. And I mean, getting to grips with this business of lockdown. I mean, you did make a point, and I'm like you. I'm very positive, and I'm lucky, and I've even spread my luck to you because you've got something interesting to do now because you're getting more and more involved in our television station. God bless you. And it actually does give us things to do. But I am aware that there are an awful lot of people that don't have that. And then they get a letter from the government, as indeed I did the day before yesterday, saying, hey, we've extended this to the end of March. Go and stand in the corner. Do not pass go. Do not collect £200 or whatever. And those are the people that are becoming more and more vulnerable. I mean, one of the things when I'm down and I feel sorry for myself, and I say to a chum like you, Paul, and so on, 9 times out of 10, you say, hey, figure out, get back, not listening to you, don't care, right? And it's absolutely the right thing to do. But a lot of people don't have people like that. I mean, what they do is they get into a depth of despair, nobody to talk to, and so on. And that's where I think that perhaps we've just got to worry a little bit about the mental health situation.
Yeah, let's go back to wartime. In the wartime, people's neighbours would come in, make them a cup of tea, and look after them. What the government does is this self-isolation, is you can't have your neighbours in, you can't have people that would normally pop in. That's where they've gone wrong. I don't know anyone, I know an ex-MP quite well, I don't know anyone, this lockdown has been a bit too long, was partly mistimed, I think. We've all been kept going by the vaccine, etc. But they've got to get back by certainly June, I say July, August, we should be getting back to starting our lives again. And I think this lockdown has been a bit of a torture for many people.
It has indeed. I don't wish to sound unsympathetic. And I don't think you do in saying, get with it. But we have tried very hard to say get with it. If you don't mind us interrupting our dialogue, which is always great and interesting. But I mean, here's one thing that we've been trying to help with through our good friend Jane.
Yes.
Hi, I'm Jane at Mirador Television, and I love to recycle, upcycle, renovate, decorate, paint, and if I can find any old junk, I'm happy to turn it into something else. So in the next few months, I'm going to give you some ideas and show you what I'm up to at home, from turning tins into bins, making garden cushions, and my recent find was a Lloyd Loom ottoman, which has a wonky leg, but I'm going to try and renovate the leg and find some lovely fabrics. So lots going on. This week, I'm just going to show you a couple of old cot bumpers that I found hanging around the house from some time ago. And I thought, well, I don't want to waste the foam. I'll turn them into some seat cushions for the garden bench.
Now, Jane is I love her to bits, but if she sits down and says to me, Keith, do that, and I know you well enough, Paul. If she said it to you, look, I've got all these nice things. What you do is you use your hands and so on and so forth. I would be totally at sea. I have no idea how to do things with my hands. It's quite remarkable. Those skills escape me. They escaped me when I was younger, and they've escaped me into older age. So dear old Jane is sort of talking to a brick wall when it comes to me. However, we have had a lot of nice things said, and that sort of thing is useful. Now, could you make her SETI, Paul, if you decided to listen to what she had to say?
I was good at I remember the Airfix. I was good at Airfix nowadays, making planes, because obviously I was a post-war baby, if you like. And I got a gold star, I think, for making I embroidered a little wallet thing. It took me ages. I think that was my. I think I realised that wasn't my career. So yeah, I wasn't great with my hands, Keith. Put it that way. The cricket. I like the fact Prince Philip is playing cricket, because that's one of my great loves. But he's gone up in my estimation for being a cricketer.
Yes, but you played for Lewis Priory at one stage, did you not?
Yeah, I guested for them, and I was regular for Brighton and Hove, and guested for Preston Nomads. So they're the three big cricket teams. But yeah, I just love it. It's unfortunately in this weather you can't really play very well, but.
Let's just take a little side issue. What's your view of what's going on in India? How are we making out? I mean, we lost one and won one. Where's the balance?
Well, the selection's a bit odd. I would say, well, India and India is the great side. Let's face it, most of India's wins are in India, correct? They don't travel very well, so they're always favourites to win the rubber. I've looked at the team. I mean, obviously, being a Sussex man, I think we're missing Archer. I think Archer gives us something that no other team has got. Anderson's getting on a bit. The new youngsters. I think is it the Durham bowler, the youngster who's opening the bowling. Stone, is it Stone, the Durham bowler? I don't know much more. Yeah. But
I'd have to doubt your superior knowledge.
Yeah. I've not watched much. I've actually been watching football and American detective programs. But I try and get in. I always say to people, I go for a walk in the morning, Keith, a walk at lunchtime, and a walk in the evening. And if I keep that up, but yeah, it's all good, and we're all being positive. But deep down, all of us have had our nightmare moments, I'm sure. And I'm the first to say that. When I had COVID, I self-isolated. It was most miserable. You couldn't even go out. So that was added misery. But I do think that's what we're missing, Keith. The fact is, we're all in our own units. The cell next to us, who are neighbours and would normally pop in and say hello, can't do that anymore. And I think we almost feel the next step is to take our liberty away. Now, I know the government have to take measures that they seem appropriate, but I just believe, talking around to people that I know in Brighton and Hove, people in Australia, this lockdown has been just ill-timed, I think, and a bit too long. I would have done it in stages. And as I say, if one country can say, well, there's one case in a city, let's close it down, where does that leave you? That's I think a bit daft. But it's statistics, Keith. I don't believe many of the statistics we're being told. I'm afraid I'm one of these. It's not conspiracy theory. It's frankly, it's difficult to do that anyway for a government or whatever. But I question a lot of things about this. And but the proof's of the pudding. Let's see what happens when the second vaccine comes out. That's the big one.
Yeah, I must say that I do worry a little bit. For instance, during the war, as you say, people would come in and they would give a cup of tea and that sort of support to particularly elderly, but to anybody who was affected by the air raids and so on and so forth. But one of the things that I didn't notice particularly was, with one or two exceptions, the sort of local associations or organizations putting their hands up and saying, we'll go and patrol at night. They could have done that. All they'd have to do is to phone the local coppers and said, look, there'll be 3 or 4 of us properly distanced. We're just going around to make sure, because the police can't do all that. I mean, it's at too low a level, and they just don't have the resources. So it's perfectly understandable. But a lot of that hasn't happened, and I'm a bit surprised about that. In other words, if you like, on the ground leadership has been thin on the ground. Having said that, there is a chap here, Mark Perriman, I think his name is, who keeps organizing the food banks. And boy, does he do a good job. Now, there's an organizer, if you like, and he doesn't get too excited about he may be struck down with COVID or thrown into jail, for that matter, for ignoring the rules. Those are the sort of people I thought would come out in abundance, but not to be. Right, Paul, while you think up your or think about your next one, I think we haven't paid any bills at all this morning, so let's do that to begin with, shall we?
When you've missed the train, don't despair. Have a nice cup of coffee. And perhaps a mince pie. At the Runaway on Lewes Station. After that, why worry about the next train? The Runaway on Lewes Station. Relaxation beyond compare.
Well, there we go. There's lots of things that can happen pretty soon. Paul, one of the things that we haven't talked about is apparently the Queen is calling an emergency meeting today about Harry and Meghan and this business of Oprah. Now, normally I would consign that to gossip, and we're not averse to gossip on this program at all. I mean, we're not trying to be terribly serious, but in some ways it does have constitutional ramifications, doesn't it? I mean, it's not the Queen just saying, "Oh, my naughty grandson has upset me. I'm going to take away his toys, his baubles." There could be serious implications if, for instance, the House of Windsor had been struck down by COVID. Everybody except Harry.
Yes, and she's the only. I think she is the only one that's keeping the royal family together. Actually, God knows if she left us, Keith, because she. I think no matter whether you're a left wing, right wing, there's something that she's talked to 16, 17 prime ministers, and each one of them has praised how erudite and educated she is. She's marvellous. But will we find another one? What worries me, Keith, is we have to modernise the monarchy. And having worked for a Dutch bank, the Dutch situation is very good. They have a very much the people's queen and who will walk around. But of course, if you bring the not royalty down to walking over the streets and being like the common man, they lose that attraction. So and if you put them too high on a pedestal, you criticise them for they're very wealthy spending. It's a hard one, but I think certainly William and Kate have approached it. I think they're going to fuse the modern outlook with the old traditions. I think that's what they'll do, and that's the only way the monarchy will survive. Because if as you say, Harry and Meghan have got lots of money, the public might not like what they're spending it on. They've set themselves up, haven't they? And yeah. I think that we all of us love the monarchy. People might have a go at it, but it's one of the most important institutions because it's an emotional thing and it brings us all together. So yeah. God, I would never have the monarchy, but you've got to modernise it, and it's how you modernise it that's the key question.
Well, I think that you raise a very good point because the people that are calling for modernisation are quite often those people who are in charge in government and so on and so forth. And when you actually mention the word reform to them, they go white, their lips and mouths froth because you're going to take away their pipeline to cash. But the fact is, of course, is that one thing after you hear people say, "Oh, it costs all this money," and so on and so forth. But one thing that the structure that we have it with the Queen at the top means that it is almost impossible to overthrow this country by force of arms, because the Queen is, of course, the head of the armed forces, but she's not the head of the government. Well, I mean, she is titular head, but so if you actually look at all the various layers, you need about 6 armies and 50,000 men per platoon or whatever it's called to actually overthrow us, and that in itself is a security in a world that seems to be going a little mad out there at the moment.
Well, a question for you, Keith. I've travelled the world like you. I must have been to about 50 odd countries, 55 countries. There's not one country I've been to where if you raise the Queen in conversation, they almost, I mean, my German friends, they really respect her and they wish they had something like it. Because in a way, she is the fallback. She's the captain of the ship. Yes, the Parliament is our democratic rights and fine, but she's there, and I think no other person or thing unites the country like that. Yeah. And I don't care what as I say, extreme right or extreme left think. I think that if you go to the man on the street, they generally will. Yeah, they'll have a criticism. Well, it's very expensive, but would you remove the Queen? No.
Absolutely not. I mean, one of the things that I find interesting about Republicans is what are you going to replace it with? Well, an elected president. And a lot of these people have never been outside the shores of the United Kingdom. So I'm being a bit careful now because I don't want to impose my own particular views on this thing on people who are listening who might say, well, I didn't have a chance of reply. And indeed, there is a chance of reply if you want to tap in. But one of the things that about the changes that we're talking about is if you have an elected president, and I've traveled the world, and I haven't been to anywhere where there's an elected president that isn't in line with the governing party. In other words, there is no difference, and there's no
Yeah.
neutrality. You simply don't get it. But why people want to take away? I mean, the one thing that nobody can accuse the Queen of is neutral. She may not like some of her prime ministers, she supports them,
Yeah.
and she goes along with the Constitution. Anyway, right, moving on, because it's now 21 minutes past 8. What other things do you think that we might have to watch out for either today? This is your last visit for the week. Are there things that we should be aware of between now and the weekend, when again we get a dose of rugby this weekend, Paul?
I think so. Yeah. I haven't watched too much rugby. I seem to be going for the walk when the rugby's on. England are back in it, aren't they? They beat Italy. Is that correct? Yeah,
that's right. That's correct. Yeah. But they sometimes take a weekend off, and I wasn't sure whether it was this weekend or not. But I hope not, because it really fills the weekends at the moment. So what should we, in your view, be keeping an eye open for between now and next Monday, next Tuesday, when you'll join us again?
Well, we've done COVID and the economy, which is very nice. I'll now do debt and a changed world. This is the key thing: debt. Everyone's talking about this spending frenzy. With debt, the key question here is we're all going to go into the new world with a lot of debt. The banks and creditors will have to forgive, but the problem is that everybody is bust. A government's bust. The people are bust. In this new era, which we'll have to look at new things. Who are going to lose? Who are going to be the losers? Who are going to be the winners? And with the debt, with people being owed money, one government might be owed money. For example, Greece might owe Britain more money than it can actually afford. How do we go into this world where everyone is technically bust? I'm sure the British government you can look at our GDP, and our debt ratios. They've come together more. So I think that yes, there'll be a spending frenzy everywhere, just like perhaps the end of the war. But my worry is, Keith, that debt is going to be bad for governments and people, and both would be helped. Who helps the people who actually dish out the money? So, I mean, it's clear I'm sure everyone's in debt, unless Putin has got, I suppose Putin and China have got enormous gold, but that's the problem. The man in the street, will we be asked to pay that debt back? The banks might be saying, well, hold it, we've lent so much money, we need to recoup this. So in other words, a new cycle has to come about. We can't carry on like the last time. In other words, we can't just spend, because in the long run we're dead, is the old saying. I'd welcome your thoughts on that, but that's the problem. How do you square the circle? Because the debt side has got to be sorted out very quickly.
Well, you're a banker and you can poo-poo some of the things that I say, although, as you know, I've worked at Reuters for a long time, and I do have one or two ideas. But you know, the thing that really bothers me is, first of all, the banking sector has carried on as if nothing has happened. I met a situation in Lewis the other day. Now, here's the sort of thing that I was going to go over. Well, I got a standing order which would have put me £5 over. So I merrily went down. I thought, I don't want to transfer it from anything else I've got. I'll just stick a £5 in. So I got down to the bank with my £5, and I was going to put it into the machine inside. And they'd had a case of coronavirus, and they had locked up. They'd simply closed the branch, which means that I couldn't put that £5 in. So I would have had a payment refused because I couldn't put the £5 in through no fault of my own, and the computer was still going to do that and then charge me £12, etc., etc. Now, all that seems to me to be wrong, and that has really got to be looked at very, very carefully. Secondly, and now this is where you may wince as a banker, but also some of the interest rates by perfectly respectable organized financial organizations are very, very, very high. And when you consider that if you go now and put £1 into the bank, into your savings account, you will get nothing back. And if you actually go and borrow £1 from the credit card company, they'll charge you 33% on it. There's got to be somewhere sort of a leveler. Now, I can see by the look of your face saying, oh, it's Hayes' economy again at work. But those are the sort of things I find that are iniquitous in our society.
No, Keith, I totally agree with you. I think, banking has to be reformed. But where's the reform coming? Because banking is, whether we like it or not, banking is a fundamental part of the establishment. It might be commercial, but let's face it, no government would allow the Bank of England or banks to fail. So this is why you don't see people getting locked away, because the bank is fundamentally part of the establishment. And as we know, the establishment is the establishment and wouldn't let that happen. So the reform has to come from within the banks. All these new banks like Starling and that, is that going to improve it? Maybe with the smaller banks coming in who can give you better rates, the public have a better choice. But let's face it, most of us like to bank with the bank that we've known for a while. And why not? And the bank that we've known for a while is not giving us any interest at all. I had an overdraft, which I didn't use, and I was charged for that. And I'm a banker, Keith, so I know all the problems and demerits of banking. I've always thought that it should be reformed because at the end of the day, it's a customer service industry. But I'm on the outside now, but I certainly made sure my clients were looked after. But who's going to reform it? That's the problem in Britain. What we always have is which body or person is going to reform it.
It's 27 minutes past. We're almost ready to go. But the one thing I would say, Paul, once again, is I like to throw these things at you because sometimes life according to Hayes can be a little bit strange. But, it didn't take the banks that long to change the entire retail face, where there are no longer managers, that everything is done by computer, that villages are due without a bank and also without an ATMS or ATM or whatever it's called. It didn't take them too long to reform in that direction. So is it really going to take them that long to start to take a look at the way that they may be able to start to redress some of the iniquities which they have actually imposed upon particularly the rural communities of the United Kingdom? Oh, not a bad speech. We've got to go, Paul. It's good to have you with us, and I think that what we might find is that as we expand our live shows, is that Paul Fowle may well have his own program pretty soon. In which case, you can chatter away to people to your heart's content and not have some old bugger like me saying it's time to go. Anyway, thanks for being with us. We'll see you next Tuesday if we don't see you before.
Have a good weekend. Bye, Keith.
Tiddle pip. See you tomorrow.